Hello and welcome to Big Picture Monday. My name is Cali Black, here with all the context you need to totally rock this week's Come Follow Me readings. This week we are studying Matthew chapters 19 and 20, Mark chapter 10, and Luke chapter 18. So we are back in the Synoptic Gospels. It's been a few weeks since we've had like a Matthew, Mark, and Luke reading, but here we are. This is also so important because next week we start Holy Week. We start our study of Holy Week next week, which is crazy. We're going to study it for like 6 weeks, so don't worry. It's Holy month and a half. But keep that in perspective as you're reading these teachings and these experiences this week. These cover literally the last couple of weeks of Jesus Christ's mortal life here on earth. So think about the things that he's teaching and the things that he's doing. In fact, this huge theme becomes very apparent to me that Jesus is teaching in these kind of final parables and examples that he's trying to give right before he knows it will be the end of his life. He's trying to teach like next level spiritual concepts. He's really trying to hone in on this idea that we can't judge people by what they're doing, like for the better even. We can't just do the right things and that's it. We have to have our hearts converted. We have to really, really mean it and really, really be in it. And that's what Jesus seems to be teaching over and over again this week, is just kind of this next level stuff. Like, don't just keep the commandments, but what is more than that? Keep the commandments too, but then also just have this love and this intention behind everything that you do to the best of your ability, right? It's just very clear to me as we read that those are kind of the big themes. I love the main focus story for these chapters definitely is about a certain young ruler. You may be familiar with this story, but it's about a certain young ruler who comes to Jesus and basically asks, like, how do I gain eternal life? And Jesus gives him some directions on how this certain young man can gain eternal life. And this ruler has a hard time hearing what Jesus has to tell him. And so that, I think, can kind of be this resonating theme with all of us of, as this ruler asks, what lack I yet? When he doesn't like what he gets in response, he has a hard time working with that. So that's kind of the main focus story, I would say. Also this week, we're going to get quite a few more parables, so keep your eye out for that. We're also going to get another interesting little interaction with James and John. Now remember, James and John are, along with Peter, James, and John, they're the three closest to Jesus. So James and John have this special relationship with Jesus. And in a couple of the records this week, you'll see, remember in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, even though there's a lot of the similar stories, there's a lot of details that are different too. But in the stories this week, you'll see there will be someone named the mother of Zebedee's children. Okay? James and John are known as the sons of Zebedee. So the mother of Zebedee's children is, are you drawing the picture in your mind? It's James and John's mom. That's it. That's who she is. Like there's a lot easier ways they could have referred to her in the scriptures. But just so you know, in some records it has the mother of Zebedee's children, aka James and John's mom, who comes to Jesus and asks some cool things, asking if her sons can sit on the right and left hand of Jesus in the eternities. We actually learn more about James and John's mom in later chapters. I think it's in, let's see, Mark 15 and 16. Mark 15 and 16, we'll learn that her name is Salome, Salome, and she actually was present when Jesus was crucified. She was one of those faithful women there when Jesus was crucified, and she also helped bring spices for Jesus's body after he was crucified. So just to give you like a bigger picture of who this woman is, even though we don't learn her name this week, we do learn her name later, and we learn by some actions that she took just a couple weeks after this that she was clearly a very devoted and faithful disciple, along with many other women who were following Jesus. Okay, that is mostly it for what happens. Just a heads up though, this week is very repetitive. I know we're used to that when we're in these synoptic gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we've got a lot of the same things. That is absolutely the case this week. So just, this is my friendly reminder that when we read a lot of the same stories over and over again, There's cool like literary techniques we can look for. We can look for point of view, right? Like what's Matthew making a bigger point of? What's Mark making a bigger point of? What's Luke making a bigger point of? What details is one person including that one person isn't? And how could that play into it? What seems to be most important thing to them, the doctrines that we're focusing on. But also there's a spiritual aspect as well, right? Praying and asking the Spirit to kind of guide our minds to what we need to learn this time. And then one of my favorite techniques is actually to just ponder on what isn't included in the story. Because there's a lot that's missing, right? Sometimes we get these interactions where like, that was 4 verses and you could have written like a whole book on what just happened and I'm so confused, like what happened to this, where did she go, where did this come from? We get these short little interactions, and so I love letting my mind just kind of wander and think, what was her life like before this, or why did he even ask that question to Jesus? Just kind of trying to let my mind fill in the blanks. And honestly, some of my coolest little bits of revelation come in those moments. And I want to be clear, I don't believe that I'm receiving special revelation as to what actually happened to a random individual 2,000 years ago, but I do think that the Spirit is teaching me what I need to know because I'm taking the time to ponder about the scriptures. So I might actually be learning a lesson that did not factually happen at all ever. Like, oh, that wasn't her background story at all. What are you talking about? But my mind wants to like fill in those blanks, and then I'm learning something spiritual. And I love that about the Spirit. It's not always that we're learning like exactly what happened, these great mysteries, but instead it's often the mysteries in our own life. It's what we personally need to know. And if it takes me pondering about a random woman that Jesus healed in the scriptures to learn that story, then the Spirit's going to use that intention to kind of guide me in the right direction. Okay, let's talk about these chapters. So Matthew, chapters 19 and 20. We actually have not been in Matthew for a while. Good old Matthew. He's the one like driving the story forward, getting us to the end of Jesus's mortal life here. So let's talk about what happens in Matthew chapters 19 and 20. And then, like I said, you'll see it repeat a lot in Mark and Luke. So I'm going to make those recaps pretty quick here. So Matthew chapter 19, we've got Jesus traveling. He's teaching a lot. He's teaching a lot about marriage and divorce. He's got the Pharisees questioning him. He's teaching that we need to become like little children, and he gathers the children toward him and blesses them. Beautiful. I didn't mention that as a focus story, but you could totally have that be a focus story this week too, of Jesus gathering and blessing the little children. So cool. I absolutely love it. And then we have a certain man who comes and asks Jesus how he can inherit eternal life and asks, what lack I yet? Jesus tells him, keep the commandments and sell everything that you have and give it to the poor. And this certain ruler does not have a good initial reaction to this. He walks away pretty sorrowful. And Jesus then teaches his apostles that it is very difficult to be rich and to enter the kingdom of heaven, that it's a very difficult thing for people to do. And then he also makes a connection that people who sacrifice more for Jesus's sake will be blessed so much more in the life to come. They will get more than that given back to them in blessings. Continuing on to chapter 20, so this kind of continues on with this record here. Jesus gives the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. Remember, this is the one where someone goes out and hires workers at different times in the day, but no matter what time they were hired, they all get the same pay, which is a great lesson to all of us about the Lord's mercy. We can join the work whenever we are able to, and we will be able to get the same reward, which is a cool parable to ponder on. He then prophesies about Jerusalem, and he prophesies about going back to Jerusalem. Everyone knows the second he goes back to Jerusalem, the Pharisees are going to try and kill him. And Jesus basically agrees with this. Like, I will be put to death in Jerusalem. And even though it seems like not everyone's quite understanding what Jesus is saying, and it becomes clear during Holy Week that no one really knew, wait, seriously, this is going to happen? But it's clear to us looking back, Jesus has lots of prophecies about this. Then we get the account that the mother of Zebedee's children asking Jesus if her children can sit with him in his throne in the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus kind of like kindly rebukes her and teaches her that that's not something that he can just give out to anyone. That is for people who have already been predestined to do that. However, he then teaches her that the greatest apostles, the greatest individuals are going to be the people who serve the most. Those are the people who are the greatest, not the ones who are seeking after the glory necessarily. Again, keeping in mind that these are all faithful, righteous individuals asking these questions. So I love that Jesus kind of kindly teaches them the correct things they should be looking for. And finally, he heals a blind man. Okay, Mark chapter 10 and Luke 18, we've got lots of similarities, so I'm going to go through these just a little bit faster. I'll highlight some of the differences. Mark 10, we start with Jesus teaching about marriage and divorce. We've got Jesus blessing the children. We've gotten the certain young ruler who comes to Jesus and asks, what lack I yet? What can I do to inherit eternal life? And he walks away sad when Jesus gives him the invitation to sell all that he has and give it to the poor. Jesus teaches his disciples that it's really difficult for a rich individual to enter heaven, and that when we sacrifice for him, it's multiplied in the next life. This record in Mark has James and John now asking Jesus if they can sit at his right and left hand, and Jesus kind of gently rebukes them again that that's not something that he can give out, and that the most important people are those who serve. And then Jesus heals a blind man. And then finally, Luke chapter 18, difference here, we get a couple parables at first. So the first parable we get in Luke 18 is the parable of the unjust judge, which very clearly is showing the distinction between the unjust judge and Jesus, who will be very just and also merciful and also understanding and kind and not being influenced by anything evil whatsoever. And then we get another parable of the Pharisee and the publican praying, which just kind of teaches a lot about pride and humility and where we need to be in that spectrum. We then get Jesus blessing the children. We get the story of the certain rich ruler who comes to Jesus asking the questions and that sort of exchange, and the ruler walking away not so happy. We then get Jesus testifying and prophesying about what will happen in Jerusalem, and then he heals a blind man. Okay, that's it for this week. My personal focus question, I can't not do it. It's too obvious. Sometimes I try to intentionally not pick the obvious spiritual question, and then sometimes I'm like, it's probably obvious for a reason. Like, maybe it's a really good question. And it is. So in Matthew chapter 19, verse 20, we get the question, what lack I yet? There have been great talks about this in general conference, so that's why I usually would shy away from it, but it is just too good. It's a powerful and simple question. When we sincerely ask that in prayer, I have found the answers are all over the place, from practical things to spiritual things to things that I don't even think are related, things that I can do immediately, things that I need to work on long term. I love asking this question, but it also is a really vulnerable question to ask. But it's been a while, and so I'm gonna ask that question very sincerely this week. That's my goal. To use that throughout my prayers. And if I don't feel like I'm getting a strong answer one day, I'll keep going to the next day until I feel like sometimes it's that, sunrise of revelation, right? Slowly but surely, I'll have something clearly come to my mind. And so whether it's the light bulb, light switch, or the sunrise effect, I'm going to pray this week, what lack I yet? What is one thing? I don't need a list. What is one thing that I can focus on to become a little more Christ-like today? And then if it's a quick thing, I'll ask again the next day. If it's a longer task, I'll work on it then. You guys, thank you so much for watching Big Picture Monday. Hey, I'm kind of revamping some things. Don't worry, nothing's like really changing, but doing some rebranding, some fun new stuff around here at Come Follow Me Study. If there's anything I could do to improve Big Picture Monday, I would love to hear it. You can add a comment, as long as it's kind, be nice, or DM me or send me an email or wherever you're listening to this. I want to make sure Big Picture Monday is working for you and being the most helpful service that I could do, or if there's any tidbits you think would be helpful, or let me know what you enjoy about Big Picture Monday so that it's not something that I change. If you're like, no, don't change a thing, let me know that too. I would love to know that as well. Just trying to make sure that everything that I'm doing are things that I enjoy, things that are helpful to other people, things that I feel are good things to be doing. So thank you again for listening. I really appreciate it. Okay, have a great week this week. I'll see you next week for Holy Week. So excited. Keep those Easter decorations up. We're going to use them for the next couple months. All right, happy studying.